For over 40 years, one of the most volatile archaeological discoveries on the planet was buried inside a mundane cardboard box labeled as junk. It sat in the damp, forgotten basement of the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, dismissed by senior scholars as a collection of useless, broken shards. Then, a late-shift graduate student pulled the crate from its shelf, brushed away decades of dust, and turned a perfectly preserved clay tablet under her desk lamp. What she realized, over the next 11 nights of solitary translation work, didn't just challenge ancient history. It completely shattered it. This was not a repetitive hymn, a royal lineage list, or a standard tax record. It was a live transcript. Someone had sat in an ancient chamber thousands of years ago, pressing a stylus into wet clay to record the exact words of an entity as they were being spoken in real time. The speaker was Enki, the legendary Sumerian deity credited with sculpting mankind, defying cosmic law to save us from a global deluge, and teaching humanity the core secrets of civilization. But this wasn't a message of celebration. It was a final, frantic broadcast recorded in the absolute closing moments of contact between his circle and the human race. 7 explicit statements spoken in perfect sequence right before a massive door slammed shut. The very first statement, carved into the clay, completely upends our entire understanding of ancient divinity, forcing us to strip away the comfortable mythology we have been fed for generations. The literal translation reads simply that we are not who you were told we are. Enki opened his final transmission by confessing that the entire spiritual framework, the entire cosmic hierarchy handed down to early human cities, was a carefully engineered illusion. It wasn't a standard malicious lie, but rather a protective layer of imagery meant to allow early humans to interact with a presence they couldn't possibly comprehend. He openly admitted that his people, the entities we call the Anunnaki, were never the ultimate architects of this universe, nor were they the absolute creators of the cosmos. In his exact phrasing, they were merely the inheritors of an infrastructure that was already fully operational when they arrived. Someone else, or something else entirely, had already laid the foundations, built the planetary gates, and designed the original biological templates for life on Earth long before his faction ever set foot here. Enki referred to these ancient phantom engineers by a single title, translating to the ones who began. He provided no names, no physical descriptions, and no origins, leaving us with a chilling reality. The beings ancient man worshipped as supreme rulers were just cosmic administrators running a massive, pre-existing machine they did not build. They simply learned how to turn the keys and operate a system left behind by an absent power. But that wasn't the whole story. The second statement shifts away from cosmic history and dives straight into the unsettling reality of human biology, declaring clearly that you are not the first. In archaic Sumerian, this didn't mean humans weren't the first timeline of intelligent life. It meant our specific biological build is part of a strict experimental sequence. Enki explicitly detailed that there were 7 distinct, fully realized iterations of humanity engineered on Earth long before our current version ever drew breath. Each past version was a complete evolutionary design, tested at scale across the planet, and each ultimately collapsed under specific design flaws. The very first model failed simply because it could not reproduce its own code. The second model fixed the reproductive cycle, but its genetic stability deteriorated completely by the third generation. The third build was biologically sound, but possessed an aggressive drive so intense that the entire population wiped itself out within a few centuries. The fourth model was completely peaceful, but lacked the cognitive processing power to utilize the advanced tools and knowledge the administrators tried to pass down. The fifth struggled to coordinate or organize beyond small tribal scales, and the sixth inexplicably succumbed to massive collective mental collapses that the council couldn't diagnose or repair. Then came the seventh iteration. By every measurable standard, The seventh build was flawless. It reproduced perfectly, operated complex machinery, maintained deep social stability, and possessed a robust, resilient biology. Yet, the council chose to decommission them anyway. Enki didn't explain the exact reason for their termination, closing the section with an ominous note stating that the eighth is what remains. We are the eighth build. We are not a superior upgrade to the seventh. We are simply the replacement version that came after the version that actually worked. And what happened next would shock everyone. The third statement cuts directly into the core narrative of ancient human suffering, forcing us to re-examine our oldest global memories. The exact translation states that the Great Water was never a punishment, but a matter of routine maintenance. For thousands of years, religious texts and mythologies have claimed that a great flood was unleashed by angry deities to wipe out humanity due to their moral failures and chaotic behavior. The Baghdad tablet dismisses this entire idea as an absolute fabrication. The cataclysm was never an emotional reaction to human behavior. It was an automated, scheduled calendar event. It was a periodic planetary wipe designed to clear the biosphere and prepare the terrain for the next planned iteration of the human experiment. The behavior of our ancestors was completely irrelevant. The waters were coming regardless of how peaceful or civilized they chose to be. The only anomaly in the entire cycle was Enki's sudden decision to break cosmic law. The tablet records his direct admission that he was explicitly ordered by the council to step back and let the eighth iteration drown in the rising waters. Instead, he covertly bypassed the quarantine and provided direct survival blueprints to a single human family line, remembered in the earliest cuneiform texts as Ziusudra. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was an act of open treason against the entire administrative council. It was the very first time Enki actively weaponized his knowledge against his own peers, a decision that guaranteed our survival but cost him absolutely everything. The fourth statement marks a profound, deeply emotional shift in the text, where the tone alters from an administrative briefing to a personal confession. Enki spoke in the absolute first person, isolated from his council and facing the human scribe directly. The literal translation reads that he broke the law of the council to save us, and because of that, he would never be allowed to return. This specific passage is completely absent from every other fragment of Mesopotamian mythology found on Earth. It reveals the immediate, devastating consequences of his choice to safeguard humanity from the planetary reset. The ruling council didn't just reprimand him, they permanently revoked his access, sealing the primary gate against him before he could escape the surface. In his own words, the door he was sealing from the inside was a door that had already been permanently locked against him from the outside. He knew the precise cost of his intervention. He understood that saving the eighth iteration meant permanent exile on a planet scheduled for eventual recycling, and he chose to execute the plan anyway. The tablet goes on to list the exact names of the 7 senior council members who voted unanimously to banish him in his absence. It stands as a rare, haunting look at a high-level entity processing the reality of an eternal sentence, realizing that by giving humanity a future, he had completely extinguished his own. But as the translation ventured into the final 3 statements, the information grew significantly more dangerous. The 5th statement opens with a classic ancient proverb stating that what has been taught can never truly be untaught. While previous scholars assumed this was a general statement on human education, the new translation reveals a far more deliberate meaning. Enki was referring to a specific sequence of advanced technological and biological blueprints he systematically leaked to early human priesthoods to ensure we could survive without our original caretakers. He listed the exact order of the knowledge he abandoned on Earth, starting with the genetic manipulation of wild grasses into domesticated wheat and the precise engineering of deep soil irrigation. Next came the specific metallurgical sequences required to process copper, bronze, and iron, delivered not as random historical discoveries, but as a pre-planned technological ladder. This was followed by the mathematical formulas behind city planning, long-term grain storage, and the foundational cuneiform writing system needed to manage resources across generations. Finally, he detailed the most controversial gift of all, the precise dietary, environmental, and behavioral protocol required to manage and extend the natural human lifespan. Enki claimed that under the original design specifications, members of the 8th iteration were fully capable of living for several centuries. The massive lifespans of the early priest kings and the ancient biblical patriarchs were not exaggerations or translation errors. They were historical realities. But that extended longevity was viewed as an existential threat by the opposing administrative faction. They immediately stepped in to suppress the protocols, engineering a forced shortening of the human lifespan to ensure that knowledge could never accumulate within a single individual over hundreds of years. They forced every single generation to start completely over from zero, ensuring no human would ever live long enough to piece together what had actually been done to us. The 6th statement finally demystifies the true nature of the ancient gates themselves, moving past our primitive understanding of physical doorways. Enki described the gate at Eridu not as a portal made of stone or timber, but as a profound thinness in the very fabric of the physical world. The tablet explains that our reality is bounded by a dense membrane, but certain geographic points on Earth possess a natural vulnerability where the barrier between this material world and the upper waters becomes incredibly fragile. With the proper technical resonance, these thin places can be peeled back to create an instantaneous passage across vast stellar distances. The gate at Eridu was the largest operational portal on the planet's surface, leading directly back to the Council's primary administrative hub. But it also housed something deeply unsettling. Enki referred to a specialized repository on the other side of the veil, translated literally as the cabinet of what was tried. This was the massive archive containing the complete genetic templates, behavioral data, and failure analysis reports for all 7 previous iterations of humanity. More disturbingly, the text states that actual physical specimens of those 7 past creations are still preserved there, held in a state suspended between active life and absolute death. They are sleeping, waiting, and engineered to endure for millennia. Enki confessed that he was choosing to seal the Eridu gate completely, because if the 8th iteration ever managed to breach the boundary, we would inevitably uncover the records of our predecessors. We would see the raw data of the projects that failed, realize our true position in the sequence, and utterly destroy our own civilization under the weight of that forbidden knowledge. But his final warning reveals that his seals were never meant to last forever. The 7th and final statement is the exact reason why modern researchers and independent astronomers have quieted down regarding this tablet. It shifts entirely away from ancient history and outlines a precise 3-part trigger mechanism that will cause the sealed door to automatically unlock from the inside, entirely bypassing Enki's original intent. The first condition is purely astronomical, detailing a highly specific stellar alignment that alters the cosmic pressure against the thin place at Eridu, naturally weakening the barrier once every several thousand years on an immutable clock. The second condition is a technological threshold. The gate will react to a specific type of acoustic and electromagnetic resonance, a sound that had never been produced on Earth at the time of the carving. Modern researchers suspect this isn't a signal humans will broadcast intentionally, but rather the massive, accidental composite frequency generated by our global infrastructure, the trillions of cellular signals, satellite downlinks, and radio waves layered across the globe, creating a single massive hum that matches the opening frequency of the gate. The third condition is biological. The eighth iteration must simultaneously reach a critical population density while mastering two distinct capabilities: the power to rewrite the genetic code of living organisms at will and the ability to communicate in real time across the entire planet simultaneously. Enki closed the tablet with a single chilling line, stating that when these three conditions converge, the door will open whether he wishes it or not, and what was sealed away will return to find us. The narrative surrounding this tablet doesn't end in antiquity. It is actively unfolding right now. Following its brief analysis, the physical tablet was quietly moved from open inventory into a highly secured, climate-controlled vault deep within Baghdad, and all public research updates ceased completely. The graduate student who risked her career to translate these lines walked away from the field of ancient linguistics entirely, placing her complete dissertation under a strict, long-term publication lock. However, the available abstract confirms that the astronomical data carved into the clay doesn't point to some distant, millions of years away epoch. It resolves to a highly specific astronomical window in our immediate lifetime, narrowing down to a period between the years 2028 and 2063. We are living directly inside that window today. The population threshold has been completely crossed. The technological requirements, instantaneous global communication, and advanced genetic editing have become routine parts of our daily world over the last 15 years. The only remaining variable is the signal, the unintended global hum of our civilization drifting across the ancient site of Eridu. The tablet offers no descriptions of what follows the opening of the gate, ending abruptly with a stark, cuneiform glyph marking the absolute termination of the broadcast. Whether that ancient door is still holding or whether the lock has already quietly turned in our lifetime is a question that remains buried in the deep silence of the modern archaeological record.